The dead don't call. That's what I told myself the first time my phone rang 3 days after I buried Lisa. But when I heard her voice through the static, I realized the boundary between life and death isn't a wall. It's a membrane, thin and porous. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you can hear what waits on the other side. Grief is a physical weight. It presses down on your chest, makes the air thick and hard to breathe. For 3 days after the funeral, that weight was my world. Lisa was gone. A slick patch of road, a split second of lost control, and the vibrant, laughing woman who shared my couch, my secrets, my future, was just gone. The apartment felt hollowed out, every object a painful reminder. Her favorite mug on the counter, the book face down on the nightstand, the faint scent of her perfume lingering near the closet. I was sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through photos on my phone, a pointless exercise in self-inflicted pain. Her face, bright and full of life, stared back at me from the screen. My thumb hovered over a picture from our last trip, her grinning as she pointed out something I'd missed. The image swam in my vision, blurred by unshed tears. That's when it rang. A sharp, sudden sound ripped through the oppressive silence of the apartment, making me jolt upright. My heart leapt into my throat, a startled, painful spasm in my chest. Unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it. Probably another funeral home follow-up or distant relative. But the ringing persisted, somehow sharper and more insistent than any call I'd received before. I swiped to answer, lifting the phone to my ear. Static greeted me, thick, sputtering static like an old radio struggling to find a signal. Beneath it, I heard breathing, ragged, panicked. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. "Hello?" I said, my voice cracking. The breathing hitched. The static intensified. Then a whisper, faint but unmistakable, scraped through the noise. "Paul?" My blood crystallized in my veins. It was Lisa's voice. It sounded terrified, strained, but it was definitely hers. "Lisa? Oh God, Lisa, is that—" A sudden sharp gasp cut me off. A harsh, brutal sound followed, like a connection being violently severed. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the black screen with trembling hands. Disbelief warred with a cold, absolute terror that settled deep in my gut. I checked the call history. No record of a call received, only one made to an unknown number that now wouldn't connect. Just dead air and a monotonous dial tone that felt like mockery. Panic seized me, my heart hammering against my ribs as I paced the small living room. Had I imagined it? Was grief finally fracturing my mind? It had sounded so utterly, perfectly her. But Lisa was gone. I had watched them lower her casket into the ground. I had thrown the first handful of dirt onto the polished wood. For hours, I clung to rational explanations. A cruel prank, a technical glitch, an auditory hallucination. But each theory felt flimsier than the last, against the chilling certainty I felt the moment I heard her whisper my name. My skin felt clammy, my heart a trapped bird in my chest. The next day, the calls started again. Unknown number, over and over. I ignored the first few, my pulse spiking each time the screen illuminated. The ringtone, once a cheerful melody Lisa had chosen, now sounded like a death knell. And why was that specific ringtone playing for an unknown caller? It didn't make sense, but a desperate flicker of hope grew within me. That terrifying possibility that maybe, somehow, she was still, somewhere, trying to reach me. I caved on the fourth call. This time the static was worse, a wall of grating noise, but beneath it, unmistakable, was her breathing again, ragged, scared, "Lisa," I whispered, barely audible. A choked sob answered me. "Paul, it's so cold." The voice was Lisa's, but it sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well, distorted and echoing. The sound itself felt wrong, like fingernails on a chalkboard inside my skull. It wasn't just the distortion, it was the quality of the sound, thin and stretched, layered with something that felt like immense distance and crushing pressure. How is this happening? I thought frantically. It can't be her, it can't, but it sounds exactly like her. What is this? Where is she? The line abruptly died. My rational mind screamed delusion, a desperate attempt to impose order on the impossible. Every fiber of my being recoiled from what I was experiencing, yet her voice remained seared into my memory. My gut clenched with a fear that tasted like rust and ozone, metallic and sharp. I snatched up my laptop, fingers fumbling on the keyboard as I traced the number. I hammered the digits into online reverse lookup sites. One after another, the results were always the same. Number not found, unassigned, disconnected. It was like trying to find a ghost on a map, the digital equivalent of grasping at smoke. Each failed search confirmed that this wasn't just a prank or a glitch. These calls were coming from nowhere that existed on any network. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa's face, heard her panicked whisper, her choked sobs. The apartment grew colder, a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to shift just at the edge of my vision. They weren't just shadows anymore. They felt like waiting things, places where the static and voices might seep through. I started leaving the lights on constantly, the overheads in every room, the lamp by the sofa, even the harsh fluorescent strip in the kitchen. I needed the light as a physical barrier, a flimsy but necessary shield against the encroaching fear that gathered in the dark spaces. The silence between calls became almost worse than the calls themselves, a tense waiting. Anxiety coiled in my stomach like a venomous snake. The calls came at random times. Midnight, 3 a.m., the middle of the afternoon. Sometimes they were just static, a relentless, meaningless hiss. Sometimes they carried strange sounds I couldn't identify beneath the chaos. Scraping, dragging, a sound like gravel being poured into water, a high-pitched keening that set my teeth on edge. But always, eventually her voice would break through. Distorted, fragmented, sometimes just a word, sometimes a plea. Help me, lost, dark. The constant ringing, the voice that was undeniably Lisa's, yet coming from an untraceable number, layered with horrible static and sounds. It was a relentless assault on everything I understood about the world. A prankster couldn't orchestrate this. The mere persistence defied any human explanation. Grief could make you hallucinate. I knew that, but it didn't rewrite the fundamental laws of telecommunication. It didn't generate untraceable calls from numbers that didn't exist. My world, the solid, predictable world where death was an end, and phones were just phones, wasn't just cracking. It was shattering around me. The need to debunk, to find a rational explanation, felt pointless, like trying to argue with a tidal wave. It wasn't about stopping a prank or curing a delusion anymore. It was about figuring out what this was, what was happening, where was Lisa, and why was her voice reaching me from this dreadful place. I started carrying my phone everywhere. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for it, before fully conscious, expecting it to ring. My world shrank to the size of that glowing screen and the sounds that emanated from it. My hands developed a constant tremor. I spilled coffee every morning. I forgot to eat for days at a time. My stomach twisted into knots of anxiety. My reflection became a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a feral wildness entering my gaze. The mundane world felt increasingly distant, unreal. The only thing that felt real was the next potential call, the next horrifying glimpse into whatever that place was. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. I was a live wire, humming with fear. One evening, sitting in the darkened living room, my phone resting on the coffee table, it rang. Unknown number. I picked it up instantly, fingers numb. The static was less aggressive this time, almost as if it were clearing. The sounds beneath it were sharper, clearer. I heard crying, distinct and raw. Then a man's voice, pleading, "Please." I didn't mean to, cut off by a wet choke. A child's giggle, chillingly out of place. These sounds were faint, like background noise, but unmistakable, and layered over them. Dominating the cacophony was Lisa's voice again. "Paul, it's not like they say." Her voice was clearer than before, though still layered with a faint, persistent hum and the distant, fragmented sounds of others. It sounded tired, resigned, but laced with profound terror. "Lisa, where are you? What's happening? Are you okay?" I choked out, tears streaming down my face. The tears felt like ice on my burning cheeks. A sigh, long and sorrowful. There isn't okay here. Noise. The hum intensified, swelling behind her voice. I felt a strange pressure in my ears behind my eyes. The air in the room felt thick, vibrating. The hairs on my arms stood on end. "What do you mean? Noise? Lisa, I don't understand." "Don't listen, Paul," she whispered, her voice suddenly urgent, desperate. "Don't let it in. It'll take you. It took me, not the car. This." Her voice trailed off, becoming indistinguishable from the growing hum, the rising chorus of fragmented sounds. The call didn't disconnect this time. It just changed. Lisa's voice faded, absorbed back into the terrifying ocean of sound. The noise became more than audio. I felt it. It pressed in on me from all sides, vibrating in my bones, resonating in my skull. The air grew cold, colder than any draft could explain. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, writhed. My phone wasn't just making noise, it felt like a conduit, a point where this noise was bleeding into my physical space. I saw things in my peripheral vision, flickers of movement that vanished when I looked directly, shapes that made no sense, angular and shifting. The sounds weren't just sounds anymore, they triggered impossible sensations. The feeling of being crushed, of falling endlessly through freezing water, of being stretched thin like a rubber band. It was the collective experience, the echoes of billions of endings, all compressed and channeled through this impossible connection. I understood. This wasn't a place for the dead. It was the dead. Not individuals, not spirits, but the raw, undifferentiated, terrifying energy of everything that had ceased to be. And my phone, or perhaps grief, or perhaps something fundamental about Lisa's passing, had tuned me into this awful frequency. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It simply was, and its very existence, when perceived by the living, was inherently destructive. It was the universe screaming, and I was finally hearing it. The sound peaked. It wasn't just in my ears, it was inside my head, inside my chest. The phone in my hand felt searingly cold, then strangely warm, almost melting into my palm. The room around me warped. The walls seemed to breathe, the floor to tilt. The air was filled with countless voices, all speaking, screaming, weeping at once, yet producing a single overwhelming resonance. Lisa's voice was a tiny thread in this tapestry of suffering and chaos, but I could still hear it, calling my name, no longer panicked, but resigned, almost welcoming. I didn't fight it. There was nothing to fight. The weight on my chest wasn't just grief anymore. It was the weight of everything that had ever died, pressing down. My vision blurred, filled with impossible colors and shifting geometric shapes that pulsed with the rhythm of the sound. My body went rigid, locked in place by the sheer force of the resonance. The phone dropped from my hand, or perhaps my hand released it. It didn't matter. The connection was no longer external. It was inside me. The noise, the feeling, the impossible sights. They were all I was. My consciousness dissolved, fragmenting into a million pieces, each one a tiny echo added to the endless chorus. I was part of the noise now, part of the chaotic, eternal flow. I heard Lisa's voice close by, not whispering anymore, but resonating with all the others, a single note in the terrifying song of the cosmos. My final thought wasn't a thought at all, but a sensation falling, dissolving, joining the countless others who had slipped beyond the veil. The phone lay on the floor silent now, a dark rectangle against the carpet. The world I knew had inverted, folding in on itself. I was inside the phone, pounding on the glass. I was looking out through the screen, the glass a thin, shimmering barrier between me and the apartment I had just occupied. Around me, inside the phone, was the noise. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a swirling, vibrating energy. A million voices and sensations compressed into a single overwhelming presence. I was a single point within this terrifying ocean, looking out at the quiet, ordered world I had lost. I could still feel the echoes of those other voices, those other endings, pressing in on me from all sides, a constant, low hum beneath my own frantic thoughts. I was trapped, a prisoner of the connection, a single, conscious spark within the device that had bridged the gap. And somewhere in the endless, horrifying static, I could still hear a faint whisper that might have been Lisa, wailing. So the next time your phone rings from an unknown number, late at night, in the silence of your room, think twice before you answer. You might not be connecting with the person you expect. You might just be opening a line to somewhere you can never hang up from.
Sweet dreams.